go ahead and get started because I have some strictly logistical information to cover to start with. So let me just begin by saying my name is Nancy Leifer. Is this too much feedback? Where should I hold it? About here? Oh, here's good? Okay. My name is Nancy Leifer. I am the co-president of the Missoula League of Women Voters, and I would like to welcome you all here tonight. This is wonderful to see all of you here, and I'll have a little bit more to say about that in a moment. I want to start out by thanking MCAT, our local Missoula Community Access television station, is here. They're going to record this and replay it again at some point on their station at some point, broadcasting it. So this is being recorded as part of a media assistance grant donated to the League of Women Voters by MCAT. So thank you very much. And in part because of that, we're going to try to be putting as much of what is said here through the microphones so that they can pick up everything. So that's one of the logistical things we'll be dealing with. I just want to also just mention briefly to all of you who appreciate MCAT, which I certainly do, that this is the year that they have to renegotiate the franchise. I just attended a community meeting on this last week, and it is very important that anyone at all who has anything or any concerns or any appreciation for our having MCAT service in this community, that you go onto their MCAT website in April and fill out the community needs survey and email it back into them or however you get it back in, because what's going to give our city government the leverage to negotiate a really good franchise contract is the level of citizen participation that happens in the month of April. So just encourage everyone to be in touch, do that. There's going to be some community meetings, there's going to be a public hearing. Be on the alert to do that so that we can make sure we continue to have even better MCAT services for the next 10 years. So, end of commercial. All right, so welcome. Come in. There's plenty of seats up front. Well, there's a few seats up front. We have more chairs we can put up in the back. So find a place to sit. Come on in. Again, I'd like to just say thank you all for coming. We have 3 co-sponsoring organizations this evening for this meeting. Climate Smart Missoula, whose mission is to engage our community in climate action to reduce our carbon footprint and build a resilient Missoula. Climate Smart acts as a hub, fostering the partnerships, networks, and knowledge necessary to address and act on climate issues equitably. Our second sponsoring organization this evening is the Clark Fork Coalition. Clark Fork Coalition has been working to protect and restore the Clark Fork River Basin for over 30 years. They are committed to protecting water quality, restoring degraded streams, and ensuring that communities are taking an active role in keeping their river clean. And of course, our third sponsoring organization this evening is the League of Women Voters. We are a membership organization. Membership is open to anyone, male or female, who is 16 years or older and who is interested in supporting the basic principles of democracy. The League was founded nearly 100 years ago, and we are best known as the nonpartisan organization responsible for registering voters and moderating candidate debates. There'll be more information about each of these 3 organizations that are co-sponsoring this, as well as some of the other organizations you're going to hear from tonight. We'll all be back there in the back at the end, so you can come back and ask us more questions about our organizations at that time if you don't hear what you want to find out in the meantime. So you may be wondering why the League of Women Voters is co-sponsoring this meeting. The League believes that an informed citizenry is essential to the quality of our democracy, and therefore we support forums geared to providing information and discussions on issues that we face as a community. So it really is heartwarming to see all of you here tonight, because this is a basic engaging in democracy activity that we're engaged in this evening, to come and to find out more and to be informed about what's happening in our world. So thank you all for being here. Again, tonight our issue is climate change, and we're going to divide the program into 2 sections. Our first section, as you know from the title of this evening, it's Climate Change in Missoula from Statistics to Solutions. And that's how we're going to organize the evening. We're going to start with the first half sort of focusing on the statistics and the science and the projections of what we have to share with you this evening about what's going to be happening with climate change. And then we'll have the second half of the meeting be talking about the solutions. And that will be moderated by Amy Sillenberg from the Climate Smart Missoula. And again, because this is we're trying to, again, make sure we get everything recorded for MCAT, we have several people here from the League who have note cards and pencils and pens of the various kinds. So if any of you are the kind of people who ask lots of questions, raise your hands right now, and they'll come bring you some writing materials and cards, because we typically have people submit questions and then we read them through the microphone so that everyone can hear. So back there, those women around that table right there, there's the ones. If you wave your hand, they will come and bring you, here's a hand right here. They'll bring you some things to write with. And then as you finish your question, wave it over your head, and they'll come get it and bring it up to the front so we can read it. Okay. So we have with us tonight at least 2 and possibly 3. Kelsey, are you here yet? Kelsey? Don't think so. We have several authors with us this evening of the September 2017 Montana Climate Assessment Report. Any of you familiar with that report? Couple? Okay, good. I'm glad some of you aren't, because it was an amazing thing to me to discover that it was out there, and part of our reason in having this meeting was to introduce that assessment to more of you who perhaps are not familiar with it. We're going to start out by having Nick Silverman, who is on the research staff with the Montana Climate Office, which is right here at our own University of Montana campus, who was one of the authors of the report. He's going to start out by going over part of the report, and then when he's finished with his section, we'll go to Alex Leone, who is also involved in writing the report. Alex is a restoration specialist with the Clark Fork Coalition. They'll give their slideshow presentations, and then we'll take questions on that part of the presentation. And then we'll shift gears and go to the solution. Do the same thing. Have a few conversations, presentations about some information, and then shift into a question and answer period. So, without more ado, we'll turn it over to Nick Silverman. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you all very much for being here. It's really nice to see such a big crowd, and I think it's important to see so many people here interested in this important topic. So I'm really appreciative that you guys came out this evening. So yeah, as Nancy said, I was a co-author on the state climate assessment. This was released in the fall. And so I'll apologize ahead of time here. I'm going to go through, I'm really glad that you said, statistics to solutions. Like, here's the statistics, and I apologize. But I think it is important to sort of lay the groundwork of what we're talking about. So I hope that's okay. Get your, kind of math and statistics brains in gear here, and then we'll get to some of the solutions later on, which I think will be really nice. But I'm going to jump right in. So mid-century projections. Up top, we've got average winter temperatures. So up top, we've got temperatures here across the state. And then on the bottom, we have precipitation. And so what I'm showing is changes, projected changes from the historical averages in these 2 important climate metrics, temperature and precip. On the left, I'm showing winter, and then on the right, I'm showing summer. So I'll break down kind of what you're seeing here, and it's broken up into climate divisions. So we're in this northwest climate division here in Missoula. So what you can see in the projected change for average winter temperatures across the state is anywhere from 1 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit difference from historical conditions. And then in the summer, that goes up. Those numbers generally go up. The range doesn't go up, but most of the numbers do go up. So here, for instance, we're projected to see about a 4-degree increase in summer temperatures. So a larger increase in summer than winter. And then down in precip, you'll see in the winter, mainly positive changes. So increases in precipitation projected in the winter, And then in the summer, you see mainly negative numbers, so less precipitation changes in the summer. Okay, so raise your hands if this is concerning to anybody in this room. That's good, because I was lying to you. This is actually the 2017 conditions that we just went through this past year. So if you think that this stuff isn't happening, realize like this is what we just saw this past year. We're seeing higher temperatures, and we're seeing more precip in the winter, and we're seeing lower precip in the summer. And I think if you were in Missoula, you saw what that meant, especially in August and September, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. But remember this, because this is really important. This is our baseline. We just felt this. We just experienced what these conditions were like in this past year. And I'm sorry for starting off lying to you guys. That's not a good way to get trust in the audience. I promise that's the only lie I will tell. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the climate assessment, like I said. And the climate assessment, we first started working on this 2015, I think. 2014, 2015. May have been 2014, actually. So several years were spent working on this assessment. I was in charge with Kelsey Genso on the climate section of this report. So we looked at all the climate data, both historical and future, for the state of Montana, and then we did some analysis, and then we gave that information to different experts in these 3 different fields: agriculture, water resources, and forestry. And Alex is here to talk about the water part of that after me, so that'll be really interesting. And so this was kind of a multidisciplinary effort, and it was also a multi-institute effort in that we had colleagues from both the University of Montana as well as Montana State University working on this. Yeah, and as I said, it was released just this fall, so we're very proud of it. Historically, temperature has increased across the state. So this is looking at average annual temperature in Montana since 1895 all the way to 2016. And you can see, you don't have to be a statistician to look at this trend and know that it's significant, and it's significantly increasing. And in fact, it's increasing, it's increased about 2 degrees over this time period. So that's the historical stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about the future stuff, what's going to happen by mid-century. And I'll focus mainly on mid-century here, but we did some stuff looking at the end of century too. But before I go into these future projections, there's a few kind of rules that I have to go through so that everybody's on the same page with how we did this analysis. And the first rule, thou shalt not rely on just one single model. So, of course, we're modeling this. So we use these big computers, and we run very complex equations on chemistry and physics and all sorts of stuff, and we look at these interactions. But each one of these models is an estimate, and we have to come up with different assumptions, and each model represents a different set of these assumptions. So the way we handle this is we run many different models to cover a span of assumptions. And so we call this an ensemble. So I'm going to show you the results of an ensemble of models. And so I think it's really important to know this isn't just what one single model says. This is what over 20 models say, done by different independent researchers across the globe. The second rule is thou shalt not rely on one future scenario. So we recognize that we have many options still ahead of us. What are we going to do? What is technology going to do? What is society going to do? What policy is going to be in place? We don't know this. So we explore a few different scenarios for what the future might look like. In particular, we focused on 2. One we call a stabilization scenario. This is one in which we essentially figure things out by mid-century. So whether that's policy, technology, society, it doesn't really matter. The point is we figure it out. Carbon emissions are tapered and they start decreasing. There's another one, we call it the business as usual. This is the one that we're currently on, and this is the one that I spend the most time exploring because I think it's really important to consider what we're doing right now and hopefully motivate some change. So I'll show you the results from the business as usual, but in the climate assessment, we looked at these two different scenarios. And then lastly, we look at two different time periods. So we look at the mid-century, and then we look at the end of century. And again, for this presentation, I'm going to focus on the mid-century because that's the one we're approaching. And so this is the average of 2040 to 2069. Okay, so this really is the projected change in average annual temperature at mid-century. And so what you can see here, dark orange, it's actually worse than the 2017 conditions that I showed you. We're talking about anywhere from 5 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit increase by mid-century from historical conditions. Now, if we look at these different climate divisions, so that's what's down at the bottom, and these are different bars, and these bars represent the range of that ensemble of models. So remember, we have 20 models, and the height of that bar is the range of the change in temperature that those models predict. So, excuse me. So if you look at the Northwest, that's where we are, you can see that out of all those 20 models, it gives a range of projections between, I don't know, about 4 and 7 degrees increase. And you can see it's fairly consistent among all the different divisions of the state. The important thing, though, is all 20 of those models agree that it's increasing, and it's increasing by a lot. So even though the models might disagree on how much, they all agree in the trajectory of where things are going. And we looked at some other metrics as well. So this is like the change in the number of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are those really hot days. So you can see here we're looking at, in the eastern part of the state, that dark orange color. That's over a month difference of days that used to not get to 90 that are projected to now get to 90 during those days. And then in the western part where we are, we get a little bit of buffering from the Pacific and the maritime climate, so and the mountains. So we're projected to see more like 10 to 15 days, so like a half a month. But when we look at the number of freeze-free days, so these are the days that are no longer freezing that used to freeze, so those minimum temperatures are no longer dropping below zero, we can see that that relationship in space changes. So the eastern part of the state, less of an impact. Western part of the state where we are, larger impact, so much so almost a month and a half difference in that metric. And then we can break it up by months. So here, looking vertically up and down, those are those different climate divisions going across, and then going across, those are the different months. So the big one, I think what really stands out is the dark orange in summer. So it's all orange, so all increases in temperature across all months, but we're projected to see the largest increases in summer. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about temperature so far. What about precipitation? Well, if we look historically what's happened with precipitation in the state, not much, right? So we've seen this strong increasing trend in temperature, but we really don't see much of a change in precip. So what do we think might happen in the future? Well, this is the percent change of annual precipitation by mid-century, projected by mid-century. And so you can see it's all green. So that means we're projected to see annually more precipitation across the state. Eastern part of the state, a higher percentage, but keep in mind they get less precip to begin with. So a percent, 1% change in eastern Montana is a lot different than 1% change in western Montana. And we can look at some other metrics that get at the idea of some extreme event type stuff. So the number of days above 1 inch precipitation. So these are pretty high. If you're getting 1 inch of rain in a single 24-hour period, that's a pretty big rain event. So we look at the number of days per year projected in the future and compare that to the number of days per year historically. And you can see those are all increasing as well. And then when we look at the consecutive number of dry days, so this is the length of time that we don't get much precipitation, and we compare that to historical conditions, we see that that's increasing, but in about half of the state, the northern part of the state, not by very much. And so when you look at that, on that same bar chart that I showed you with temperature, you see something very different. And so remember, let's just focus on the northwest. That's the furthest left. That's where we live. That bar, the height of that bar represents the span of all the different model predictions. And you can see that span is really big. And the other thing you can see is that it goes across that zero line. So essentially, some models are saying that this metric, number of consecutive dry days, is increasing. Some models are saying it's decreasing. So I say we don't really know. So I think the story is we've got pretty good understanding what's happening with temperature. Precip, it's a bit more complicated. Now, when we look at this by months, there's some patterns that again stand out here. One, we see, we know annually we're projected to have increases in precipitation. But when we break it down by months, we see most of that's happening in the spring and winter. Keep in mind what happened last year in 2017 when I showed you. Increases in the spring and winter. In the summer, decreases. Keep in mind what happened last year. Lower than average precipitation in the summer. So, there's a reason why I showed you that 2017 conditions, because they look really similar to the conditions that we're projecting by mid-century. Okay, so remember these? Average temperature, change in temperatures in the winter, a bigger change in the summer, increases in the winter for precip, decreases in the summer for precip. So what did this mean for us this past year across Montana? Here in the western part of the state, a lot of smoke, right? I think we all felt that. If you're in the eastern part of the state and you're a farmer, you lost a lot of money this year. So no matter what part of the state you're on, you're getting impacted by these conditions. I think that's really important. And, when you talk about the smoke stuff, how much does this matter for wildfires? Well, this is data from the last 15 years. And on the y-axis, so the vertical axis, that's the number of acres burned in Montana. And then on the left here, this is the temperature from normal. So the departure from normal, the how much above or below average that temperature is. And so what you can see is it's essentially increasing exponentially, that number of acres burned with temperature. And that red dot up there at the top, that's last year. So you can see last year, much higher than normal temperatures, much higher than normal number of acres burned in the state. We can do the same thing with precip. That's what's here over on the right. It's an inverse relationship because now the wetter things are, the less number of acres burned. But again, you see the red dot, that's where we were last year. So I think, this stuff matters. I think we have a really good example of what I'm talking about as far as mid-century conditions by looking back at this past year. And so I think it's very easy to sort of realize what the new norms might look like in the state of Montana. So this is the last slide I have for you guys. So I'll leave it here and let Alex fill in the information on water.
Just a reminder, if you have questions, raise your hand. Our folks will come around, give you a card, a pencil, write them down, and then we'll be having a brief question period after this section of the program. Okay. They're right there, ready to go. Anybody raise your hand, I'll bring you a pencil and paper. There's one. Oh, that's Katie. Okay, good.
All right, thanks everyone. Just to repeat, my name is Alex Leone and I work with the Clark Fork Coalition. Before I worked for the Clark Fork Coalition, I was in school in Bozeman and I helped out with the climate assessment, in particular the water chapter. I think Nick gave a great overview of the temperature and precipitation projections that we're expected to see going forward, and that's obviously going to impact our water resources as well. And for our chapter, we looked at the water portion of Montana. Okay, so first I just wanted to give a quick overview of the water cycle for everyone. I'm sure most folks are familiar with this. But water on the Earth's surface, in oceans and on land, transpires and evaporates. It condenses into clouds. Those clouds precipitate moisture in the form of snow or rain. A lot of that snow and rain eventually makes its way down into the valley bottoms, is infiltrated into the ground, and it makes it back into our rivers and oceans where the cycle starts over again. And I think the reason I like to show this at the beginning is that climate change impacts all of these processes in some way, and it's just kind of good to have an understanding of the water cycle. Okay, so for the water sector, we looked at 6 different areas of Montana's water resources. It was like a 100-page report, so if you really want to check it out, go ahead and check out montanaclimate.org, and you can read all 100 pages. For today, because of the limitations of my time, and it's pretty late, I didn't want everybody to fall asleep, I was just going to cover snowpack and snowmelt and runoff timing. If you want more info, please check out the Montana Climate website. Okay, so the Continental Divide separates more than just our football rivalries in Montana. It really separates the climate, and a lot of folks in Montana know that. West of the Continental Divide, which is indicated by those pinks and fuchsia colors, we get a lot more precip. So some of our highest precipitation recording stations in western Montana receive over 50 inches of precip a year. Missoula receives around 14 inches, so just kind of a comparison. In eastern Montana, we have locations that get less than 10 inches of rain a year and actually are technically considered a desert. Another important thing when it comes to snowpack is that eastern and western Montana really have completely different snowpack regimes. So in western Montana, the mountain ranges that store the most snow are really like the Kootenai area, the Cabinets, the Purcells, some of the Flathead ranges, the Mission Range. Those hold a lot of snow. So we have snow recording stations there that get over 40 inches of precipitation and snow a year. And these are at somewhat low elevations and mid elevations. So a lot of these stations are actually recording that much precip at like 6,000 to 8,000 feet. So that's kind of somewhat low when you think about that much snow or that much precipitation. In eastern Montana, it's a lot different situation. So in the Absarokas and the Beartooths, we have elevations over 10,000 feet, right? But we don't see snowpack nearly as much as we do in the northwest part of the state. So in the Beartooths in the southeast part of this, or the south central part of the state, some of those high elevation areas receive maybe 30 inches of SWE a year, even though they're 2,000 feet higher than the areas that receive more snowpack in the northwest. And that was kind of a convoluted explanation, but hopefully it was clear enough. Okay, so for the climate assessment, as they did the climate part, for the water sector of the climate assessment, we looked at not only trends, so what's happened over the last period of record, and then we also projected what was going to happen into the future. So the first thing I wanted to show is we looked at snow course stations in Montana. How many folks have done a snow course measurement in their life? Anyone gone out and measured snow? So this has been around since the 30s. There's around 100 sites scattered all over the state in mountainous areas, and folks go out 4 or 5 times a year in the wintertime and they measure snow by hand to determine how much snow is there. So we have some stations in Glacier Park that go back to the 30s, so that's why we decided to use that data set. A lot more folks might be familiar with SnowTel sites. Anybody who skis probably looks at those. Those are automated stations. They've only been around since the 50s, so we decided not to look at those. But what we found when we were looking at snowpack, and a lot of older folks I think will let you know this is happening, we've seen a decline in snowpack in Montana since the 30s. Around a 20% decline west of the divide, and we're seeing a more pronounced decline at lower elevations. We break down the snowpack trends by elevation and east and west of the divide in our water sector, so if you want more information, more detail, go ahead and check that out. But the overall really take-home point here is that we've seen about a 20% decline in snowpack west of the divide, and this is all normalized too for the data nerds. So it's, yeah. Okay, and one of the most visible manifestations of declining snowpack and increasing temperatures is the demise of glaciers in Glacier National Park. This is the Cheney Glacier located near the Canadian border. The top photo is from 1911 and the bottom photo is from 2005, and you can see marked declines in the glaciers. There's a lot of uncertainty around the projections, but a lot of scientists in Glacier are predicting that permanent glaciers will be gone from Glacier Park in the next 30 years, and we'll still have some permanent ice and stuff, but true glaciers will probably be gone. Okay, so we looked at the trends for snowpack, and we also did some projections. In a very similar manner to what Nick described earlier with temperature and precipitation, we looked at a couple scenarios of emissions. That 8.5 is the business as usual scenario that we're kind of on track for, which is represented by the blue bars. And again, just like Nick explained, we have the range of all the climate models, and then the box kind of represents where most of the models fell. So I know this is a lot of data, but what we're looking at here is April 1st SWE. So that's snow water equivalent. That's the amount of moisture that's in the snow on April 1st. And scientists a lot of times use that as a metric for peak snowpack. That's not always the date where snowpack peaks, depending on where you're at, but it's just a good metric that we use. So something that's really important to look at here is all the way on the left is the Clark Fork Basin above St. Regis. And depending on what climate model and projection you're looking at, we're predicting anywhere from like a 30 to a 60% decline in snowpack in the upper Clark Fork. And that's pretty marked, and that's by just mid-century. If you look at the projections at the end of the century, they're even more severe. So we're expecting to see a decline west of the divide. We're not expecting to see as much of a decline east of the divide, and the model estimates are not as confident, and that has a lot to do with elevation. Again, like we talked about earlier, we have a lot higher elevations east of the divide, and they're a little bit less prone to warming weather or melting snow due to the warming weather. Okay, so we've looked at snowpack trends. We've looked at projections. What's that going to do to runoff, right? That's the big question a lot of folks want to know. So the top map shows how runoff timing has changed over the past 50 years. So we've seen anywhere from a 10 to 20 day increase in runoff timing. So what that means is we're seeing runoff happen earlier. We're all seeing that, right? 2015 and 16 were prime examples of that in Missoula. Going forward, we're expected to see that trend continue. So we're expected to see in some parts of Montana anywhere from another 15 to 30 day increase in that snowmelt timing earlier in the year. So we're going to start seeing a lot more water push off in the early spring and late winter than we are during the springtime, and we've seen historically. And a lot of that is caused by these increasing temperatures in the spring. Okay, so back to a quick review of the water cycle again. And we talked about how some parts of the cycle are going to be impacted, but what the overall takeaway here is we've seen the trends are showing a decrease in snowpack that's going to continue going forward. We're seeing earlier runoff, right? And that's going to continue to happen. We're going to see increase in flows, like I said, in winter, early spring, and decreases of flow in the summer when we really need them. And as Nick described, this year was very interesting, and it may be portending what's going to happen in the future. Stream flow-wise, though, especially in Missoula, we were kind of okay. We had so much snowpack last year that streams in Missoula were pretty much okay. And let me just show one more graphic real quick. Okay, so this is a hydrograph. This is my last slide. I know I talk really quick, but I'm almost done. So on the bottom we have a date, and this is across an annual, so across a year. On the left we have winter, on the right we have winter again, just a cycle. On the top axis, on the up and down axis, we have stream flow measured in discharge, so cubic feet per second, the amount of water that's flowing down a stream. The black line is the median over the period of record, so the average stream flow at Tura from 1985 to 2016. The red and blue lines represent 2015 and 2016. And as you can see, we're seeing a lot of, especially that red line in 2015, we saw a lot of water push off in the wintertime, in the spring. And then we're seeing a huge decrease in flow in the summer when we need it. And that, again, is exactly what the models are showing. So this year we were a little bit okay, especially because we had that really big June rain event that kind of stopped the demise of our stream flows. But 2015 and 16 might be portend what's going to happen in the future. So I know that was quick, but this is the question time. So if you have any questions for Nick or I, please feel free to ask.
Parks? Do you have any climate change projections for different elevations in Montana, which you kind of touched on, but you want to summarize that?
Do you have it?
Climate change and elevation.
So we didn't project at least snowpack or stream flow at different elevations. We looked at the trends and we looked at elevations. I don't know if Nick, I don't think you looked at any.
Yeah, it's actually really, it's a great question because it's really important, and it's something that we did not spend a lot of time looking into, but it's something I think we'd like to in the future. We broke everything down. I showed you those big climate divisions, those big kind of chunks of area across Montana. There's 7 of them. And there's a reason why these are all aggregated together, and they've been aggregated this way for a long time. But as we know, especially in the western part of the state, there's a lot of topographic variability within there. So I think it's a good question. We didn't break it down by elevation, but it's something that we probably should in the future.
Okay. Question? Nick Silverman showed a graph of showing the days below freezing mid-century and the end of the century. He said below 0, but did you mean below freezing?
Below 0 Celsius.
Okay.
What's that?
Is there anything in the data that makes you feel hopeful?
I can answer it.
I can't do, go, you go.
I can't. Yeah.
You can't?
No, I thought you
Okay.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one part of the presentation that I left out for this group gets into the water resources stuff, and I'll hand it over to Alex here in a second. He can answer it. But I showed, okay, well, what is, how is temperature and precipitation related to wildfire? And so we showed that they're really strongly related. But you can also say, okay, well, how much is temperature and precip related to water resources? And obviously, it's related. I mean, temperature and precip drive our water resources, but it's not the whole story. There's a big, huge management component on how we manage our water resources that makes quite a big impact. And so I think, globally, we have to deal with carbon emissions and climate change, but at a local level, we can deal with adaptation, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. So that I think is probably the one part of my presentation I left out, which is the hope part, and there is some of that.
And along the same lines as what Nick was talking about, I think he showed increases in precipitation in the winter and spring. And if we're able to capture some of that water, I don't know if that many folks are familiar with Painted Rocks Reservoir in the Bitterroot. That is something that saved the Bitterroot River fishery. They're able to release water throughout the summer that they store in the spring and winter for the fish and the farmers. So dams aren't always bad. They're not always good either, but there are some options we have. If we know we're going to get an increase in precip in the winter, we're seeing that in spring. There are things we can do, like Nick said, management-wise. And we'll talk more about that in the second half. It's a great teaser.
I have just one more question to ask, and then we have an excellent question to lead into the next section. So I'll ask this question first. What can we say to people who assert that this is a natural cycle and cannot be prevented?
I think, you know, ultimately you have to engage in conversation. I think you have to come to events like this. I hope, I think you have to engage the scientists that are doing this work. So I'm really happy that you guys are here listening. You know, there's not a lot of people, not everybody wants to listen to a scientist, you know, give a bunch of statistics. So I think communication is really important, and I think listening is really important. So I've seen more and more, I've given these talks around the state, and I think people are pretty open to this conversation at this point. So I've seen a lot of movement in the right direction as far as that goes.
Thank you both. You'll both be around afterwards, right?
Yes.
Nick and Alec will be around afterwards, so if you have more questions, you can talk with them one-on-one at the end. So the last question from the first part was, what do you suggest citizens do to avoid business as usual and its worrisome projected results? And fortunately, this is a perfect segue into the second half of our presentation, which is solutions. And I will, at this point, turn it over to Amy Sillenberg, who is the Executive Director of Climate Smart Missoula.
Great. So thanks everyone for being here. It is great to see such a big audience. Thanks to MCAT for being here too, and Alex and Nick and Nancy too for organizing this. So yeah, if by any chance as you're going along here you have to leave and you're still not feeling hopeful, know that there are a lot of people doing a lot of things to around the world and here in Missoula to basically work against Nick's projections, right? So our job is to prove him wrong because the scenarios that he presented are the business as usual, and we know that business as usual is really basically not acceptable to us and our children and having a planet that we want to work for all of us. So his projections are correct in that they're projected, but our job is to help fix that. And I do think there are things that, and we're going to talk about a little bit of them. I mean, the library closes at 9, so we won't get to all of the solutions and all the things we can do. There's just too many of them, right? But we'll at least get started. And my job is to talk a little bit about Climate Smart, because we do try to bring together different groups, and we have a lot of different activities that we at least bring forward into the community. And then we have time to open it up to some of the other groups that are working on climate change here in Missoula. And we're going to focus it a bit on the local side of things. But some of the groups that are working here are thinking bigger than that. So there'll be a little bit around the how do we reduce our carbon footprint, and a little bit about the adaptation pieces that Alex spoke to. So I started with the bird because I always have to start a presentation with a bird, because I used to actually be more of the statistics side and the science side of climate change. I was a wildlife biologist. I worked for Audubon. I did a lot of climate work looking at wildlife issues. And over time, when I did that as a scientist, and then as I worked more, I started working on federal policy. And that was really exciting back in the 2007 and 8, because we were going to change the world at the federal level here in the U.S. And we didn't do that yet, but it will come back around. So basically, I started, long story short, is I started working more locally with a number of folks and decided that, if things were kind of broken back in D.C. at this point, what could we get done here? Let's see if I can, forward this. And so basically, we got a lot of people together, a lot of inspiring and really active and awesome Missoulians came together and said, hey, let's try to do something locally, and we ended up starting Climate Smart Missoula as a local climate effort about 2.5 years ago, just in 2015. And it came together basically by a lot of those conversations that Nick just spoke about, a lot of talking to people, about talking to community leaders, people like yourselves, people that care about the issue, in summits and small meetings and big meetings, and trying to figure out what it is we can do. And we developed the Community Climate Action Plan. And again, that was about 2 years ago. So just so you know, in Missoula, there's a lot of things happening at different scales and different levels. The city has a municipal climate action plan. There's a community one that we helped to generate, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the county right now is working on a county climate action plan for their operations. And at the end of my little 5-6 minutes here, we're going to hear from the city and the county, because there's some great things happening. And what's really great is that we're all working together. We're not all doing the same things, but we're all doing a lot of that conversation and a lot of working together. So I guess know that a lot of people came behind some of these efforts and are still here with us working on these issues. The way the Community Climate Action Plan came together, again, listening to the folks that helped us with it, is we broke it up into focal areas or buckets. And so if these are a little hard to read for folks in the way back, the different things that are part of climate change, addressing climate change locally, range from zero waste to renewable energy, transportation and smart growth, local food and agriculture, healthy community, that health link, sustainable economic development, water conservation and protection, we just heard about, urban and wildland forests and open land, green building, and energy efficiency and conservation. So, right from the beginning, you'll see that all of these different focal areas that intersect with climate change are pretty varied. And the folks in this room, if you're looking for a way to tap in and get involved, you may choose one or two, or maybe not all of those, because it's big, but there's sort of a place for everyone. At the middle, we put education and outreach and inventory and metrics, meaning that's kind of what Climate Smart is trying to do. A lot of people are working on education outreach, clearly. We need all of that. The inventory and metrics is something that we took on to try to measure our carbon footprint and our how much energy we use currently. So it's really big what this issue of, climate change is really big, but also the pieces of the solution are also pretty broad. And I believe, and I've seen, that a lot of people kind of find their niche and where they might want to tap in. Again, we'll see more about that at the end. So I just thought about one of the things that Climate Smart started doing was, because there's all these different buckets, that we meet the first Thursday of every month at Imagination Brewing in the community room and talk about a different one of those. So if you're interested, the next one is March 1st, and we are going to be talking about zero waste. It turns out that waste has a pretty big carbon footprint to it, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So if you're interested, I can share more, but it's on our website too. From 5 to 7, the first Thursday of the month, we're at Imagination. And everybody's welcome. So just a couple things here. We did, with the help of the city, actually, we did a greenhouse gas emissions inventory where you try to figure out where, how big is the carbon footprint for the community of Missoula, and we drew a boundary about the urban development area. It's not just the city, but it's not the entire county. It actually goes out to Bonner, and the numbers that we have right now are for 2014. It was before Bitcoin. Have you guys heard about the energy in the Bitcoin factory? Have you heard about the noise from the fan? The energy in that one Bitcoin factory out there is about 1/6 of all the energy that our community uses. That's crazy, right? So we got to fix that. Or we're going to be at business as usual, and Nick's going to be right. So what we did with we got all the data that we could that says, how we use energy and where it comes from, electricity and what happens at the dump and the natural gas that we use, transportation, and we put it all into this big tool, and they spit back out some numbers. And basically what we realized is that it splits it out into numbers, but also into a pie chart. The gray is transportation. About 37% of the carbon emissions for the community of Missoula is transportation. We'll hear a little bit about that because there's lots of ways we can shrink that number. The next is commercial, so all our businesses. It's considered commercial energy, residential energy. Sorry, the colors are a little weird here, a little washed out. But residential, renters and homeowners are the next piece of that pie. Solid waste is about 9% of our carbon footprint, our emissions. And then industrial energy is about 2%. Before Bitcoin. They'd get thrown in there. So we don't have a lot of big industry. We've got a lot of things dispersed between commercial and the residential. That's kind of the built environment. So our job is to think about these different sectors and figure out how we shrink that pie. So again, we're looking to, it's really important, I think, that we figure out for whether it's the city, municipal operations, countywide, or the community, we got to know where we're starting so we know whether we're headed, the trajectory is headed in the right direction, and then we can, basically get a handle on climate, the things that we can do locally. So a couple things that Climate Smart does, and I'll just run through really quick a few things that we've at least started or worked with partners, a lot of whom are in this room on some things. Because we're Climate Smart, we have a little program called Solar Smart where we've helped people figure out how to go solar. And this could be everything from supporting solar energy, supporting the policies that we need to make it work in our state. And we work a lot with the Montana Renewable Energy Association. I don't think Andrew's here, but it's a great local organization that works with solar installers to help promote distributed energy. And then we've done some things like some workshops. We just had a workshop last week helping people understand, well, if I wanted to put solar on my roof, how would I go about it and make that process easy? We have a lot of things on our website. I could talk to you more about that. So increasing solar energy at the distributed level, meaning like on residencies or maybe small businesses, and then trying to figure out how we could grow that into more commercial, large-scale solar energy and have the policies that we need at our state to make that happen, because that's a problem. And then related to solar is just Energy Smart in general. We have a program, an energy challenge that we did last year, kind of a pilot program, help people figure out how they could reduce their energy use in their own home, both behavior or maybe things they could do with their furnace or things they could do with their lighting. We have a whole program around reducing your use. And actually it's pretty neat. We're working with a group at the university, a capstone computer science class, and they're helping us develop a really, really nice tool that will be available on the website, on our website, and we'll share with folks so that you can, if you want to partake in a challenge, hopefully we'll have a Missoula-specific tool that you can use, and then if a bunch of people participate, we can actually track how much energy we use and kind of make it, there's ways we can make competitions and games and different things, similar to what Missoula in Motion does with their Way to Go program. So we're going to be hopefully building that out. And the big thing with energy is we're trying to figure out as a community, working also with the city, the county, and some other folks, how do we really change the energy system from fossil fuel-based to more renewable and clean energy? And what are our options here? What are the barriers to do that? There are some things we can do, not just solar panels on people's roofs, but we actually are somewhat limited. So again, one of the things that the piece of the solution and ways folks can get involved is to be active at that policy level where we can change and get and have more laws and regulations that work more in our favor to move away from fossil fuels. So we've got Solar Smart, Energy Smart. The last big program that Climate Smart has, we call it Summer Smart, and that's really our adaptation piece, and that's what a lot of people got involved with. How do we help weather the weather better in the summer when we're seeing more extreme temperatures and droughts, wildfires, and the big challenge here, as we saw last summer, wildfire smoke. How do we help the vulnerable in our community survive those episodes in a healthier way? So we did the big program working with the city and county health department about getting people HEPA air filters in their homes so they could breathe easier. There's lots of things that we can talk about. Summer is just around the corner. But there are, again, the mitigation piece is the way we reduce our carbon footprint. And then there's some things we do to adapt or prepare. And then just before we get to some of the groups, the things that other groups are doing here, I just wanted to mention, oh, whoops, I forgot this. We also, one of the big things we need to do in the summertime to help with that Summer Smart and dealing with, changing summer conditions is to work on shade. We helped with some partners build a shade shelter, and it's really important to water trees, grow trees, and build out our urban forestry. So those are just a few of the examples that people can get involved with, whether it's through us or just through, anybody getting trees and watering trees and whatnot. So just a couple of things here. Again, we have a lot of education materials. You can find out more on climatesmartmissoula.org on our webpage. And I was thinking as I was thinking about what we wanted to talk about today, and before we get to the round robin, because there's about 5 or 6 groups here that are also doing some climate change work. But before we get to the round robin part of it, everybody has a reason that they're concerned about climate change. For me, I just really like winter, and I feel like part of my job is to keep winters cold so we can build snowmen and do some fun things that way and keep snow around. So I think it's important for all of us to think about what it is that we want to hold on to, and we work to have those conversations and communicate that. there's a couple, it's kind of hard when you talk about climate change to think about what scale you want to work on. I have a book back here that is called Drawdown, and it looks at everything we could do internationally around climate change. And it's got these really wild, big solutions. It turns out that the number one thing that we should be doing is working on refrigerants. Yeah. Who knew? And then a couple more down there is family planning in developed countries. It's all kinds of things that we could be doing at really big scales. And if you're really curious, check this book out. So there's like big scale things. There's also being the change and living well and sparking a climate revolution. There's all kinds of books and information about people that do their own thing and do something maybe what seems small, but it's that drop in the bucket. If there's enough drops, then we fill the bucket. And a lot of that has to do with talking to each other. So it used to be, 10, 15 years ago, at least when I started working on climate issues, people just said, well, just be the example, right? So I put solar panels on my house, and everybody else will. And you may have noticed that not everybody just does what other people are doing unless we really start talking about it. And I think that's what people are realizing we need to do at this point, is not just be the example, but talk to your friends, families, and neighbors about why you're making the changes that you're doing. So I put so can you go to a neighbor and talk to them? Your roof is great angle, and you could have solar panels on your roof too. And the reason I did it is because I care about this changing climate. And actually frame it in things, your values, and those values that you hold dear, and be willing to talk to your neighbors, maybe that you don't know all that well, about your values and about why you're making those activities. So and that looks just like my neighborhood. Two more things here really quick. Grist is a really neat online news service. If you're trying to figure out what to do, they have all kinds of great articles about what's going on out there in the climate world. And they actually suggested in a recent article that we should be okay with being climate strange. Like, do what you want to do and be okay if it's a little bit odd, because that gets conversations going. So if riding a unicycle around in snow makes people watch you and wonder why you're doing it, then you can talk to them about climate change. So that was a kind of interesting article. Be weird, be strange. I'm going to skip that one just because of some time here. But I think there's lots of different ways that we can move forward on climate, from the policy to the individual actions, especially if we kind of wear it loud and proud and talk to folks along the way. So with that, we're going to hear from a couple different groups of folks that are also doing something, just one or two, it's just a couple minutes from some different folks that are doing things, and then we'll get to that Q&A. So I think we'll start with the city and the county, who are both here. And again, it's really neat that there's so much good cross collaboration between local government and some of the nonprofits here. So I don't know, I'm going to introduce, how about Diana Moneta? Diana is new as of December, in the position working for the Missoula County as the Energy Conservation and Sustainability Coordinator. Did I get that right? Okay.
I'll come over here, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to knock it down. Thanks, Amy. As Amy mentioned, my name is Diana Moneta. I am the new Energy Conservation and Sustainability Coordinator for Missoula County. It's a new position for the county. It's really exciting for me. I've been working on these topics for quite a while in the nonprofit sector, and it's exciting to see the county really committing to this issue. In the county's 2016 growth policy, climate change was one of the guiding principles of that policy, and the policy also included a number of specific goals related to reducing the county government's contribution to climate change, as well as climate adaptation and resiliency for the county community and communities. So just real briefly, what we're doing, what I'm starting to do in this new position. Before I started, the county had completed an inventory of its greenhouse gas emissions from county operations, thanks to a AmeriCorps Energy Corps member that was working with the county. And we're now taking that the next step. We'll be setting some emission reduction targets for county government operations and developing a plan to achieve those targets. So that's what the county is doing kind of in-house, and then looking more broadly at the community as a whole, working with the city and with Climate Smart and with other local partners. We're going to be looking at some of that adaptation and resiliency planning for the community, and also just working with local partners to on programs like energy conservation, renewable energy, and so forth. So I'm excited to be in this role and to be working with such a great group of local partners as well. And handing it over to the city.
Great, and so now we have Britt Holowinski. Is that right? All right. AmeriCorps Energy Corps service member working with Chase Jones at the city.
Hi, everyone. So the city of Missoula is really committed to addressing climate change, especially at a municipal level. This sort of started back in 2008 with the greenhouse gas emissions baseline survey for municipal operations, which then brought into the municipal Energy Conservation and Climate Action Plan, working at reducing the greenhouse gas emissions of municipal fleets, facilities, wastewater treatments, and so forth. And since then, we have partnered with Climate Smart Missoula to work with them and support them as they help reduce greenhouse gases with the community. We're really excited to reach the greenhouse gas reduction target in 2015. We had an 11% reduction from 2008 levels, surpassing the goal of 10%. We're looking forward to releasing the 2017 interim report, which will inform the next goal. And we're also focusing on a couple other areas such as renewables. The city is really excited to announce that we received Silver Soul Smart designation, which means that we have a relatively painless and straightforward process for getting residential solar. So that's super exciting. We're looking at energy efficiency of buildings, reducing the transportation footprint, and then electrification of municipal fleet, as well as expanding infrastructure for citizens to have electric vehicles while also greening the grid. There's no point in having really green vehicles if the electricity is made from coal. Going forward, we're looking forward to bringing the 0 by 50 zero waste plan to the council in mid-March, and that'll be another really exciting step. And that's a little different than the climate action plan because that is community focused, not just municipal focused. Municipal operations will be held to the same standard as the community, but it isn't just for municipal operations. So the city of Missoula is really excited to lead in the absence of federal leadership and support. We've signed on to uphold the Paris Climate Accord as well as the Chicago Climate Charter. So we're really excited to support and work with local groups, organizations, businesses, and citizens to really help Missoula be sustainable and carbon neutral and other great climate goals.
Great, so there's great things happening at the city and the county, and again, we're working together and with all of you. I mean, the four of us need a lot of help in all those regards. So a couple other groups I know that are out there. And if you want to just come up, or we can grab a mic, but I know that John's going to come from 350. Did you want to speak, Sky, for Environment Montana, and Gary for Faith and Climate? We'll have transition. Yeah, so there's about 4 or 5 more folks that just want to mention a thing or two about what they're up to. And then again, after the Q&A, we'll have some time to visit with all of the folks that have been up, and we'll talk about what they're doing. So I'll turn it over to John.
Great, thank you very much. I'm one of the co-chairs of 350 Montana. We're kind of the action group in the area. We have engaged in the past and almost certainly will engage in the future in nonviolent civil disobedience, and that's a little bit of our specialty, although we do some other things as well. Some of the things we've done in the past, we've been involved in blocking the coal trains and going through Missoula. We're probably responsible for the fact that you have to get buzzed into Steve Daines' office at this point because we occupied it and were arrested there a few years back. A group of us joined Break Free Pacific Northwest in Anacortes. We played a small role in the overall action that blocked access to those refineries for several days. It actually resulted at one point in them withdrawing an application to build a new facility, although with the recent election, I understand they've put that application back in again. We also do letter writing campaigns. We've done some forums. We've testified against the Tongue River Railroad in front of the Surface Transportation Board in Miles City. We testified in front of the PSC and get involved in a lot of different ways. There are a couple things coming up that I want to make sure you're aware of. just 2 days from now, Thursday, there is a citizens hearing at the Children's Theater that is being sponsored primarily by MEIC and Sierra Club. There's an application to open a new section of the Rosebud coal mine that the DEQ and the EPA decided that since they had to have a public hearing, there was only one place to do that, and that was in Colstrip. So MEIC and Sierra Club have arranged for a hearing to take place in Missoula with a court reporter. Transcripts will be created, and that will be submitted as additional testimony. There's some more information on the table in the back. If any of you can come out to that, that would be really great. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Thank you, the Doubletree. And it's 7 o'clock Thursday, so thank you for the correction. And we have a whole bunch of things coming up in the next week or two. The other thing that's coming up, and this is the MCAT one, on Thursday, and then on Friday at the Wilma, on the 22nd and the 23rd, we're co-sponsoring with some other groups, The Reluctant Radical. This is a film about some people that have also engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience, the people that came into Washington State, Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota, and in combination shut off every flow of tar sands into the United States at the same time. They're still going through trials at this stage of the game. The individual who shut the flow off in North Dakota started a 1-year jail sentence not too long ago. The individual who shut the pipeline off in Montana and in Washington State will both be here when the films are shown. Our primary focus going forward is Northwestern Energy's plans for replacing the power from Colstrip. And they put in a proposal to the PSC last year that we testified against. That proposal was to build 13 gas turbine generators to replace that. Fortunately, at least in part as a result of our testimony, plus a lot of work by a lot of other people, the PSC said, no, go back to the drawing board on that. That doesn't mean they aren't going to come back with it a second time, and we're pushing on that right now. We're additionally have done some nonviolent disobedience training because we figure something may come down the pike that we have to act on very quickly. Whether they're going to start digging in another month for Keystone XL or what's going to happen, we're not sure, but we're prepared to go to work if that happens. And I do want to answer, or at least give you my answer to one question that came up earlier. And there was the question about what do you say to somebody when they tell you that, hey, the climate's been changing all the time. And my answer is, yes, you're right, the climate's been changing all the time, but it has never changed at anything like the pace that we are experiencing right now. And when you look at all of the different things that people point out that might be causing climate change, there is only one thing that tracks with the changes we're seeing. You've heard everything. It's the energy from the sun. It's this, that, and the other thing. The energy from the sun goes up, temperatures go up. The energy from the sun goes down, temperatures keep going up. There's only one thing it tracks pretty nicely with, and that's the carbon in the atmosphere. And that's what you tell them. It may not work, but that's what I tell them anyway. Thank you very much.
Great, so John will be back with some other folks from 350 at the end. I think Sky's going to come up, Sky Borden with Environment Montana.
Thank you. I was wondering if there was a story about Steve Daines' buzzer. Now I know. My name is Sky Borden. I'm the Director of Environment Montana. We fight for clean air, clean water, and open space in the last best place. This is a pretty savvy group, so you may have heard that the current administration is considering rolling back the protections of the Clean Power Plan. By the administration's own estimate, Clean Power Plan is supposed to save 4,500 American lives every year in pollution reduction. They have an open comment period right now, and they're also having some listening sessions across the country. We would like to send a really clear message that if any changes are going to be made to the Clean Power Plan, we should be making it stronger, not reducing it or getting rid of it entirely. I have a couple of different opportunities for you guys to take action today, and I hope you will avail yourselves of them. On the back table in the corner, I have a sample letter that we think is pretty good, and you can sign your name to it if you would like. If you're also feeling a little bit more motivated to give them a piece of your mind, we have some empty comment cards that I would love for you to fill out. And then lastly, the listening session close to us is going to be in Gillette, Wyoming, coal capital USA, and that's going to be on March 27th. We're actually, we've sponsored a bus of Missoulians, or Montanans in general, to drive down. Transportation and lodging will be provided. There are limited spaces, but if anybody is interested in participating, please talk to me. I would love to get as many powerful voices out there as we possibly can.
Great, so those are some of your action-oriented opportunities. One person that was not able to stay was Ellie Costello, who works for MUD, an organization that's been around forever. And I just wanted to put a shout out that they are putting on their annual Earth Day celebration on Earth Day, Sunday, April 22nd at MUD, which is out near at the same location as Home Resource. So there's going to be other opportunities to do some climate-oriented things coming down the road. I'm going to switch to Missoula in Motion. They're going to talk a little. So transportation was that big part of that pie. Bob was going to come from Free Cycles, but he had another event. Free Cycles does a lot of great things to encourage bicycles. There's a lot of good people working on things to more active transportation, but we thought we'd hear a couple minutes from Missoula in Motion.
Yeah, thank you. Missoula in Motion is a program of the City of Missoula, and we, if you aren't familiar with us, we provide education and encouragement for the use, to increase the use of sustainable transportation. And we do that, we have a logging tool and route planning tool that helps you if you were to, say, leave this meeting and go home tonight. Brainstorming ways to get around town a little more sustainably, you could go to the logging tool and find all of your options from your house to the good food store or something. So we really want to make it easy for people to know that they have options, and that sustainable transportation isn't alternative transportation. It needs to be the way that we get around town now. It needs to be the new normal. So right now we're in the Clear the Air Challenge, if you've heard of that. It's the month of February. And the idea is borrowed from a program in Utah, actually, but the goal is to clear the air. And you guys know the valley inversion gets pretty insufferable in the winter, so we just wanted to see how much carbon we could save by using sustainable transportation. The logging tool does track that impact, so you'll see miles traveled, number of sustainable trips, calories burned, if you're into that, but also pounds or tons of CO2 that's been diverted. And I ran the numbers actually just before coming here, and so far we've diverted 1 ton of CO2 so far this February, so hoping to get past 2 tons. And if you have a workplace that would like to participate in the Commuter Challenge, that's also another thing that we do in May, just promoting friendly and sometimes heated competition among workplaces in Missoula. So send your workplace our way if you guys aren't already registered. And if you have any questions about your transportation options or how to get from down the Bitterroot to Missoula in the most sustainable way, you can get in contact with us and we'll help you find your way. Thanks.
I think I failed to mention that that's Kim Hutchison. She's new with Missoula in Motion. So, and then how about let's bring up Gary Hawk, who is with a group called Faith and Climate. Switching around, you can see there's a lot of variety of ways to get involved.
Thank you.
As Amy said, I belong to a group called Faith and Climate Action. We are an ecumenical group, meaning we represent quite a variety of faith communities. We produce about 3 events a year. Our next event will take place the weekend of April 27 and 28. And we are bringing in a keynote speaker. We'll have 3 workshops, a concluding celebration. I want to emphasize that you do not need to belong to a sangha, a synagogue, or a church to participate in this. If you are looking for motivation, inspiration, encouragement, evidence that people are cooperating with each other, come to this event. You'll see that that's happening.
Cool. So did you want to talk from Cloud Fork Coalition? Yeah. Just a couple more here. Back to Alex.
Cool. So I'm going to put my other hat on really quickly. Like I was mentioned earlier, I work for the Clark Fork Coalition, which is a watershed group in Missoula. We kind of work in a little bit of a different vein on water conservation efforts throughout the Bitterroot, Blackfoot, and Clark Fork. One of the things that we do is we purchase water rights from willing owners. A lot of times they're ag folks, and we put those back in stream. We also purchase water rights. For example, if folks are familiar with Tin Cup Creek in the Bitterroot. It's a really important tributary for cutthroat trout and other trout. That was disconnected from the river for over 100 years, the Bitterroot River. We got a deal with the folks that own the reservoir in the wilderness, and we purchased some of their water in exchange for helping them rebuild their reservoir. So that's just some of the projects we're working on. We also just started some beaver mimicry projects where we put in fake beaver dams or constructed beaver dams on streams to try to increase the amount of water we're putting back in the ground for storage. So kind of a different vein, more regional, but that's some of the stuff we're doing. A lot more than just the cleanup, which is what a lot of folks in Missoula know us for. So.
So they do their annual cleanup, which does divert a lot of waste from the dump and try to recycle as much as we can. So Dodie Anderson is with Transition Missoula, and I think this may be the last of the groups, and we can do a little bit of Q&A and visiting. Unless, Bonnie, did you want to say something? Okay, two more. Well, real quick here, we're almost done, but I think this is really encouraging. There's a lot of variety of ways to get involved.
Thank you. As Amy said, I'm Dodie Anderson. I'm with Transition Missoula. And the transition means transitioning from fossil fuels. So the overall umbrella of what transition is about is getting away from fossil fuels and changing to a more renewable, regenerative, and sustainable society. It actually is a global organization, and we are the local Missoula chapter of that, or initiative as they call it. One thing I wanted to dovetail on what Amy had talked about, talking to your neighbors. Transition Missoula has a program called Transition Streets, and it's a guidebook where you can invite neighbors in, have some fun together discussing certain topics, and it gives you discussion starters. It gives you ways of looking at your carbon footprint, your waste, your transportation, your energy, your food, and it also makes it kind of organized, and it makes it a fun way to do the personal transitioning that all of us will have to be doing. So thank you.
Great. So Dodie will be here if you want to figure out how to get in touch with Transition Missoula. And then we didn't want to leave out food. Food is a part of our climate solution. This is Bonnie Buckingham with Community Food and Agriculture Coalition.
Very good. Kind of a different aspect, I guess, from energy, although our food travels 15,000 miles to get to our plate, so that's a lot of energy. We work at the local level with food and farming, trying to create a more sustainable system right here in our valley. As we see drought happening in other parts of the country, Missoula actually has a good aquifer and may become a much more significant place for food production in the future. And so we work at kind of 3 different levels. We work on ag land conservation, keeping lands open for farming in the future. We are helping to train and give resources to the next generation of farmers, and in that transition from retiring farmers and landowners to a new generation of farmers who will grow our food in the future, and then really trying to do a lot of public campaigns and also ensuring that no matter what your income, that you have access to that and can take part in that system. And so really trying to centralize and make our food and farm system more sustainable. So there's a lot of ways you can get involved. You don't have to get involved with our organization. There are a number of them. You can also support our local farmers and start buying local food and really creating that system from the pocketbook and the economy side. But we have a lot of different initiatives that we do, and I'm happy to talk with anyone about that after we're done here. Thank you.
Did I miss anybody? Any group or so, clearly that's a variety. There's lots of great things going on. This isn't everybody or everything, but what I love about Missoula is we do work together. And we don't all try to do it all, but there's a lot of good, strong partnerships. So thanks to everybody that just spoke for all the good work that you're doing. And I guess some questions? Do we have any?
What can our city and county do to recruit business and industry that have only the lowest carbon footprint? I.e., how can we keep developments like Bitcoin out?
Who wants to answer that one? Anybody from the city or county? I feel like if you're looking at opportunities to figure out where Missoula can go, I don't have a great answer for that, but I think we are trying to figure out how we can incentivize more sustainable business. Right now, there's some interest in looking at, we talked about being a soul smart community, both the county and the city. We're looking at some ways to incentivize businesses that or when people are building the building code so that it's easier to build a sustainable building. And there's some interest in trying to get more of a sustainable business group going that can talk about how we could incentivize those businesses and actually really work with the businesses that may have a big carbon footprint to either reduce it or maybe not get the same support that a better company has. So all I can say is I think there's opportunity there. I think it's ripe for action. So we could have, I don't have any great specifics that are happening right now.
Next question is to the city and county representatives. Most of what you suggest are individual or organizational things, like installing solar panels or increasing fleet efficiency. What about community actions, increasing mass transit, getting people out of their cars, and zoning so that people don't need a car, aid for farmers to not use chemicals, greenhouse things, etc.?
Anybody from the city? Chase, you want to come up? I will mention Missoula in Motion is part of the city. So what Kim talked about earlier is one answer to that. This is Chase Jones. You can introduce yourself, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chase Jones. I'm the Energy Conservation and Climate Action Coordinator for the city. This is a big question and touches on a lot of sectors. And I'm probably speaking for some other departments, mostly in development services, it sounds like. But as Amy mentioned, Missoula in Motion is part of our transportation planning division. You heard about the great work that they do and did. Our transportation planning division also just updated our long-range transportation plan with an aggressive mode split to actually get people out of single occupant vehicle cars and into mass transit more, riding their bikes, and building infrastructure so that we have more walkable streets and neighborhoods. And then as far as development goes, recently also our growth policy was updated called Our Missoula. A lot of folks in this room were probably involved in that. It was a big public process, and the title of it was Focus Inward. And so I think with both development and transportation and a lot of those questions that were asked, that was sort of the gist of our growth policy. And greenhouse gas reductions, sustainable transportation, local food, and all of these sustainability concepts were threaded throughout each of those sections. And so we have some really solid planning documents and are now working to implement those and to encourage residents, businesses, nonprofits, and all of these great people doing good work to help us with those guiding documents. So I think those are some good big picture things we have in place.
So Amy, I think this one's for you. What legislation at the state level would help support what you're doing?
I think there's a lot of things we could be doing at the state level. And I think instead of a specific piece of legislation, there's a lot of what's called enabling legislation that we could have that pass at our state legislature that will allow Missoula to do what we want to do. So there's a lot of opportunities for this different ways that we could pull money into a renewable energy loan fund. There's a program called PACE that we tried to get passed last time. There's different things that you could do with a resort tax that potentially you could use some of that money to develop some of this sustainability work that we have. There's some different opportunities that we just are not allowed to do as a community. If we could pass some rules that would enable us, then different communities could decide what worked for them. And that's what feels really frustrating, I think, right? A little bit to folks working locally is there's a lot of action locally, but there's just where our hands are tied, especially if you look at what other communities in other states are basically allowed to do. And then I think there's a whole suite of legislative opportunities that would allow us to get our energy in different ways and from different renewable sources. So everything from expanding the type of, kinds of solar systems that we might be able to build and access that. So there's laws that would allow us to have more solar energy, allow us to have different kinds of systems, and some of that is laws, and some of that is laws that would direct the Public Service Commission to allow us to do the kinds of things that we'd like to do. And we're not alone. Missoula is not the only community that's asking for that. There's also other urban communities around our state that would like to be able to try some new and innovative ways to finance things and ways to kind of move forward.
Fund the state climate office.
Yeah, oh gosh, thank you. That was a huge one. I was actually thinking about this earlier. So when Nick was talking, that project that they did, they worked on they did the climate piece, forestry, water, and agriculture. There is so much more we need to understand. Health, recreation, wildlife, and we don't have funding to do those kinds of assessment. We don't even have a state climate office that's funded. So the number one thing the state could do is they could fund some of these efforts, and then Nick could have a job.
Real quick, if I may.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, just real quick, last legislative session, there were a number of pretty good net metering bills that all went down, mostly didn't even get out of committee, and there were some pretty bad net metering bills that were passed and fortunately vetoed. So there's a lot that happens in the legislature. There's a lot that can happen a lot better to make net metering more attractive and more attractive to larger operations, more attractive to agriculture, et cetera.
One more comment over here.
Yeah. Jean, so just if we're going to pass any of those different rules or laws at the legislature, we need a different legislature. So then we need to think about who we're voting into office. Yep. Especially at that state level. But I think we have a comment here from Jean Curtis, County Commissioner.
I just thought I'd give a little comment about a couple of things that have come up. One, nobody recruited Bitcoin. They found us. I serve on the Missoula Economic Partnership Board, and I know that they came here for several reasons. One is they were able to negotiate that affordable electricity. One, it's not humid here. And one, there was a big building. So, nobody recruited them, but they are, as you've probably seen in the news, looking at setting up similar, not that company, but similar ones around the state. So we're looking at as we're upgrading our zoning this year, we're looking at how do we, a lot of these things just weren't anticipated in anybody's legislation. And that's definitely not in our zoning. So we're looking at our zoning because someone has come into our planning office that wants to set up a server thing in container cars. If you can imagine how noisy it is where you are, Gary. And I think that would be really noisy. So that's one. Some of the things the county other things that we're working on, we did buy solar panels from Missoula Electric Co-op because we do have electricity that county taxpayers pay for that run irrigation pumps and sewer pumps and those kinds of things that are in Missoula Electric Co-op's regions. So we bought some in Lolo and some in Frenchtown to help reduce our footprint. And those, their power is also produced by water, not coal. So that was our one thing to do. A couple other things that we've done, just changing out lights. If you can imagine how many lights are in a detention facility, changing out lights, they're paid for themselves in 3 months. So we also don't pay for cable TV in the jail anymore. They get sack lunches twice a week. So, you know, some of those kinds of things that we've tried to reduce our footprint, and we're so glad to have Diana on board to help us implement some of the things that we've learned that we need to work on.
Great, thank you, Jean.
So this is a good question to end on, and Amy, again, I'm going to direct this one to you. If you could make one single recommendation to the average citizen on how they can make an impact on climate change, what would it be?
I'm not sure I want to answer this. I want to hear from everybody else. I think we need to, I know, I was going to say, oh, it's transportation, oh, it's your built environment. I think we need leaders in place that are going to work on climate from the federal level all the way down. So I think it's not just voting, I think it's really working for that transformative change that we need.
Wonderful.
And I think we need to do that with hope and fun and creativity. How's that? Because it can get kind of hard. So, but I would love to hear. I don't know if we're going to wind this part down. Okay, we have to wind this part down. We don't have to be out till 9. I would love to hear what other people think of that number one thing that you can do, because everybody should do one thing, and it doesn't all have to be the same, obviously. So. Thank you, Nancy.
Oh, yeah. Thank you all for coming tonight. The library closes at 9. We need to be starting to pack up here in about 10 minutes, but we do invite you, all the people that you heard from are going to be back there at the tables. Check them out on the way out, pick up some more literature, and thank you all so much for coming, and whatever it is, go out and do one thing. At least one thing to help with climate change. Thank you all for coming.